This video will contain no story spoilers, but I will be discussing specific details surrounding the manner in which the game tells its story. Gameplay mechanics will be covered in more detail in part 2. Hey everyone, my name is Razzy and I was pretty bummed when Prey 2 was cancelled. Well, kinda. I never played the original Prey and I only really looked into its sequel once it was scrapped. The whole space bounty hunter western Blade Runner thing looked amazing. It seemed like it didn't really take itself too seriously, and as far as I could tell, the gameplay they showed for it was promising, no matter how little of it there was. But who knows what was wrong with it. I honestly don't think Bethesda would cancel it if there weren't big issues with it. Nonetheless, here we are with Prey 2017. A game that's so different in terms of tone and gameplay style to the original Prey games that I don't understand why it wasn't just given a different title. I think people would be far less angry about the whole situation and far less hesitant to get behind this new game if that were the case. Considering it had to be done, I couldn't be happier with the decision made to hand the project over to a studio like Arcane, the developers of one of my favorite games, Dishonored. And my goodness, does it show. Not only with the way the game feels to play, which is startlingly similar, but also in the way that it looks. Although Prey is set on Talos 1, a space station, and obviously not the steampunk settings of Dunwall and Karnaca, the aesthetic of their inhabitants as well as the architecture in these places are quite similar in a couple ways. In spite of being far more technologically advanced, there's a lot of wooden structures, stone statues and decorations, carefully crafted ornaments, fancy furniture and other doodads on Talos 1. Both Prey and Dishonored have settings which are very difficult to pinpoint in relation to the history of our civilization. They have a distinctly retro look to them. Furthermore, entire sections of Talos look like they've been taken straight out of BioShock's Rapture, and I couldn't be happier with that. Prey isn't pretending not to be a blatant tribute to games like BioShock. Though I think Prey is a lot more systems-based than both Dishonored and BioShock. It's more of a System Shock 3, and so the station is incredibly intricate, with tons of things to discover, observe, and interact with. There's so many entrances and exits, and everything is interconnected to create one massive structure you can scour from top to bottom, inside and out. What I'm trying to say is that this attention to detail really gives off the feeling that this station was physically inhabited and built by people. And they do a really great job of hiding the fact that the game world was made to be played in. It just feels like a real place, with a great sense of style, atmosphere, and purpose. Like Dunwall and Karnaca, it's so well realized and rich. Arcane are experts when it comes to bringing a world to life, in spite of how, ironically, they often reek of death and devastation. Even the on-screen graphics have the same sense of detail and motion as in Dishonored. They're so beautifully illustrated and animated, enhanced by lovely sound effects that accompany the smallest pop-up notification. Graphic design like this makes me pay attention to what the game is telling me. Sure, its complex beauty might distract from the words at times, but at least it always directs my eye to what is important. The notifications don't seem like annoying info dumps that I want to skip as fast as possible. And in a game with so many systems and so much to learn and know about, that's really important. Their games may not have the smoothest frame rate or the most mind-blowing graphics, but I cannot stress the amount of effort that Arcane puts into their visuals. And I'd take this style and substance over that boring and generic Killzone sludge any day. And that was the first thing I noticed once I started up Prey 2017. While the environments are arguably a lot more claustrophobic than those of Prey 2, and they do have a distinctly different atmosphere and tone to them. Even the biggest haters of this game have to admit that Arcane managed to maintain that feeling of grit, grime, and general tangibility that was evident in what we saw of Prey 2. Plus, this isn't just another Blade Runner city, which I like, even if we haven't actually seen too many Blade Runner cities in video games, at least. But let's talk about Prey's story, because while it might not have struck me as much as the game's art style, it's something that I definitely want to discuss. So, the game does try and cover some deeper themes and ideas, and it does that to varying degrees of success, and I'm still kind of pondering that stuff. So I think for the most part I'm going to be focusing on its more superficial narratives. You play as either a male or female Gordon Freeman. No, sorry. You play as either a male or female Morgan Yu, a scientist aboard the Talos 1 space station researching an alien species called the Typhon. Inevitably, things go horribly wrong and Rapture, Talos is turned into a massive floating wreck in outer space. The opening to the game is really strong, so I won't spoil it. But let's just say that it leaves you with a huge feeling of uncertainty. You're suffering from some serious amnesia, so you don't quite know what is going on here, and you don't trust anyone. You don't even trust yourself that much. All you know is that you can't let the Typhon get back to Earth, so you're gonna blow it up. The space station, Talos 1, not Earth. Naturally, things get very complicated as you find out more about yourself, along with the station and its other inhabitants. Although I didn't find them as interesting as those in the original BioShock, you come across a colorful cast of weird and wonderful characters that interfere with what was initially a relatively straightforward plan, for better or worse. The most colorful character being the station itself. As I was saying earlier, Talos 1 just feels lived in. You can learn so much about the people here just by investigating their office or their bedroom or whatever, by digging up email chains or just by listening to audio diaries of them. You can piece together a ton of short stories if you have the patience and the will to explore. This is something that the original BioShock did so damn well, and it's obviously not entirely unheard of in other games, even games released more recently. Though I still think it's cool to see another game that utilizes these techniques in this day and age when the budget for video games is a lot bigger and there's more technology at the developer's disposal. I was quite surprised to find actual side quests pop up in email chains and other more obscure places, because most games with optional objectives present them relatively clearly in comparison. There's no doubt that I missed quite a few here though, and that's pretty awesome. I'm keen to go back and see what I missed. But as much as I love how Prey's world is so intricately interconnected, and how it uses its environment to tell stories and present side objectives, there is a downside to all of this, and that is the fact that a bunch of these side objectives are fetch quests, which is excusable in this case, because the gameplay is so well developed that getting anywhere can be tackled in a multitude of ways. Though it does become quite a slog when you're backtracking to different sections of the station and have to endure some pretty damn long loading screens. Loading screens are by far the biggest problem with Prey on the standard PS4. They're tolerable in between deaths, but when you're frequently jumping between different decks, they can become insufferable. This is an issue I've noticed with all Arcane games on console, but it's particularly bad in Prey, especially considering how many of them you may need to endure to get where you need to go. Though honestly, I'm willing to put up with it if it means a more juicy and detailed world. Plus, these quests are optional, so you don't have to jump back and forth through more loading screens than necessary if you don't want to. I mean, a person might die here and there, but it's okay, I suppose. It's not okay. You're blowing up everyone in the station anyway. So yeah, it's okay, right? It's okay. It's not okay.
Yeah, I actively avoided doing some of these side objectives because I just couldn't endure any more backtracking in these annoyingly long loading screens. That being said, not all of these side objectives are marked, so there is a chance that you might just stumble upon one of them and you'll get a pop-up notification saying you completed this thing, and that actually happened to me on occasion. And on top of that, you do frequently revisit older areas during the main quest, so I suppose you could just do whatever objective is set where the main quest is set if you're backtracking that way anyway.
And yeah, unfortunately the whole fetch quest backtracking thing extends to the main story as well. It took me 17 hours to complete my first playthrough of Prey, and I dabbled in a couple of the side quests, but the main story really begins to drag towards the end, where it becomes obvious that the game is just throwing obstacles in your way to unnecessarily extend its playtime. You get to go to some cool, interesting new areas, but a lot of it is just retreading old ground. Even if that old ground has a couple changes here and there. You're always so close to something, so close to an answer, before it slips through your fingers and rolls down a gutter and past a cluster of mimics and another long loading screen. Constantly pushing answers away didn't really build the suspense. Instead, it just made me play recklessly at times, running past enemies and wasting valuable resources, inevitably getting obliterated and making me even more frustrated. It was a vicious, stupid cycle that was, I guess, equally my fault. Other issues with the main story include the fact that it contains quite a few exposition dumps. You're either listening to someone tell you what's important, or you're watching someone tell you what's important in these 3D TVs. Granted, these things are awesome. You can smash them and repair them as much as you'd like. Smashing glass in Prey is pretty damn amazing in general.
Finally, I wouldn't get my hopes up when it comes to figuring out what all these weird flashback thingies mean. I just found the payoff to be a bit silly and unnecessary. I can see why people might like it, though I just think it was handled a bit too quickly, and once again with quite a bit of exposition. But yeah, that's my take on that. So yeah, I think the story in Prey is a decent one, though to me personally, I found that some of its best stories were the ones that I wasn't forced to uncover. They were the ones told by the environment, by emails and voice notes and such.
The mystery and general plot in the game is quite compelling, but I felt it was dragged out a bit too long, with too many unnecessary sidetrackings and fetch quests and quite a bit of exposition. It does delve into some interesting themes regarding purpose and choice, but not nearly to the same extent as BioShock. But I wasn't expecting that, and that's completely fine, because as much as it's a throwback to games like BioShock, it's not really trying to compete with it in that regard. Even though there are multiple endings, now I know generally how the game concludes itself, and I've seen the twists and turns. So maybe during my second playthrough, the main and side quests will be less of a drag now that I don't feel so driven to see those things. But although all this talk of story and world building is important, and I think it should be critiqued in a game that tries really hard to incorporate such elements, one of the most significant ways the game goes about telling stories is in its gameplay. Games like Dishonored and Prey are all about how you decide to use the vast array of systems at your disposal in order to overcome obstacles. While I think Dishonored is more about finding the most hilarious and fun way of completing objectives, Prey is more about finding the most efficient way. Both entail crafting your own short stories that other people may never experience themselves. But that's a discussion for the next unorganized video. With a game as complex as Prey, a lot of what I say might contradict itself, and don't think for a moment that any of this is objective. While it may sound like I'm rather certain about my opinion, everything mentioned in these videos is not set in stone. I've only played this game once, after all, and I'm guessing I've barely scratched the surface. There are so many other ways in which the story might alter depending on other smaller details and generally how you go about things. And that's what makes your perspective so vital in the end.
This joke is entirely overused, but would you kindly please note that some of the topics discussed in this video may transfer over to the next video, and vice versa. So I'd recommend hearing the complete conversation and everything that I have to discuss before you contribute to it. So yeah, other than that, I hope you enjoyed the video, I hope you enjoy your day, and I will see you all in the next one.